In this lesson, we're going to begin creating our images or maps to bring into Photoshop. Alright, so inside of 3ds Max, we're going to be using render to texture to project all of our different maps onto this plane, so that way we can take those into Photoshop. Now before we get started, let's start to color code these different blocks, so that way we can create a selection mask in Photoshop to make it a lot easier on ourselves. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to select these L-shaped objects, and I'm going to switch these to a common green color. I'm going to make sure that it's pretty dark. And we have this object here that's that same color. Let's make that something a little bit different. Let's go ahead and make this like a dark blue color. And that way we have these colors in here that aren't touching one another, and it's going to be a lot easier to see them and select them. These lighter blue colors aren't going to work all that well because whenever we render those out, they're going to come up almost white, and we really don't want that. So I'm going to change these to kind of like a purple color. Let me select this light blue here, and I'm going to switch this over to something like red, and just making sure that that's not going to conflict with what we have up here. Let's select these kind of lighter or kind of a darker pink color here. Let's switch that color up there. Let's go to let's try something like this orange color, and let's see if that's going to work well for us, and that should be okay. Let's take these yellows and let's make these kind of a darker purple color. That should be okay. And these light pink, let's switch these up. Let's do, I'm looking at these, just trying to figure out a good color that's going to work out for that. Let's see. Let's try that pink color there, see if that works well for us. That should be okay. Let's select these. I think those would be okay. Let's change the color of this one. Let's change that to that red color. Don't see that. And let's do one last double check, making sure that these are going to work well for us. These two can stay that color, should be okay. I think we're pretty good at this point. Now, let's go ahead and select our plane, and this is what we're going to project all of the information to. So I'm going to make sure that the length and width is set to 256 by 256. I'm going to take my width and length segments down to 1 by 1. And let's come in here and just kind of take a look at what we want to project down. Now, looking at my top view really quickly, let's hit F3. And this is going to switch me over to wireframe, and it's probably going to be so dense that we can't see through it. Yep, I figured. Let's hit F3 again, and it's like we're in shaded view here. Now what I'm looking for is the area in which my plane is going to show up. Now I'm going to have a couple of issues whenever I start creating things like my ambient occlusion map. Okay. Wherever the edge of the plane is going to be, and if I have something like this block which comes right out to the edge and there's nothing on this side, it's not going to project any sort of shadow from the block that should be right here. So whenever we tile this map over, it's going to appear as if these blocks are right in this slot here. So the problem that we're going to have with this is the shadow is not going to show up on this side. So we're going to be able to notice that in our tiled texture. So what I want to do is I want to take these two blocks and I want to copy them over right over to here. So I'm going to grab my move tool, and let's make sure our snapping is turned on, and I'm going to hold down shift, and I'm just going to drag those over, and that should snap right in there. Now we want to make sure that there are no other areas like that in which we're going to have that sort of problem. So we will have that issue right here. Okay, so what I need to do is take these two blocks, hold down shift, and drag those over, and make sure that they snap right there next to that. Okay. So I believe everything else should be okay. Everything else was overlapping. So we should be okay at this point. Alright, so now that we have this, let's go ahead and start to project down all of our different maps that we're going to need in Photoshop. So the first map that I want to make sure that I get is going to be my selection diffuse mask. Okay, so let's grab our plane, and actually before we bring our plane in, let's bring in a skylight. So we're going to go to our lights and then skylight, and let's just drop that in there. I'm going to make sure that my sky color is white, and we're going to leave that just the way it is. Now let's select our plane, and let's hit Control Z one time and then right click and then select our plane, and we're going to go to rendering, render to texture. Now you can hit 0 on your keyboard to bring that up as well. So let's make our output path. Let's go ahead and set this up, and I believe that I've set this up to a referenced images folder inside of your project files. Okay, we have our render settings here. Let's switch that over to 3ds Max Scanline, and I'm going to hit oh, actually let me set this up. Let's do let's go ahead and do Scanline no advanced. So we're going to load that in, and you can go to your render setup. You could do this if you like. I'm not going to do that just yet. Okay, let's go ahead and close this, and we have our object selected, so it's showing up in this list. Okay, and we want to do some projection. So our projections, we're going to pick what we want to project to our plane. So let's hit pick and then select everything in our list here. Add that in. That's going to take just a minute to think about that. Okay. And once that is finished, we're going to take our padding down to 0. I want 0 padding between the edges and the diffuse map there. I don't want that there. So with projection, we've picked all of our objects. We're using our existing channels of our objects on the sub-object level and the object level. Okay. And now we need to add what maps we want to put in here. So I'm going to hit add, and right now we're just going to do a diffuse map. So I'm going to add elements, and I'm going to rename this, and I'm going to call this diffuse. Actually, let's just call it selection mask. Okay, we're going to set this up as diffuse color, and we could do a quick test on this at 256 by 256, and I think that would be a good idea at this point. So let's go ahead and hit render really quickly, and this is going to render out our texture, what it's going to look like, and this is a good idea to go ahead and just get an idea if this is going to work properly or not. So it's always a good idea to do a couple of tests like this. So this should take only just a couple of seconds here. There we go. Now you'll see that we have our mask here. We've got all these different colors. Everything is looking good, but we do have these red dots everywhere. And let's go ahead and explain what that is exactly. Well, whenever we project something, we're going to have things that are called ray misses. So we have this ray miss check. And what that means is that it's not able to project down exactly what it needs. Okay. Now, because that's not working correctly, we need to change our height map. Okay, the minimum height and our max height here, and that should clear that up for the most part. But we will take care of that. Let's go ahead and uncheck that for right now. It's really not that bad at this point. But you'll see that we have our height map section here, and we have this buffer min and buffer max height. Okay, let's go ahead and fill these in. So I'm going to do 130 on my minimum height, and then on my max height I'm going to do 150. Okay, let's go ahead and close this. Let's take a look at our object, and you'll see here that we have this projection modifier applied. Now, the way this works is the projection cage, which is what you see here, is going to project down anything below it down to the source. So in this case, our plane. So what I want to do at this point is I want to kind of increase the distance between my cage and my objects. So what I want to do is I want to come into my cage rollout, and I want to reset my cage. Okay, it's going to flatten down to my plane. And then I'm going to adjust my push amount and just take that up as high as I need to get above my objects. So you may have to continue to scroll that and give yourself a little bit of distance there in between your objects. And you can go as high as you need, but do it within a reasonable distance, I should say. So this is pretty good. Let's go ahead and re-render this just to kind of see what we get and see if that cleans anything up. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pause it here and then let that re-render. Alright, so that's finished rendering out there. You'll notice that those red dots are gone because we turned off that ray mist check, but we do have a few black dots to where this is missing that. But that's really not a big issue at this point. Those dots are minimal right now. Okay, so we should be okay. So this is looking good, and we are now ready to go ahead and set up the rest of our map. So let's close that out, and let's render out this selection mask at the preferred dimensions. So we're going to make sure that we have this selected and go to 1024 by 1024. I'm going to make sure that I have the name still correct, looking good, and let's re-render that, overwrite that file, and then I'm going to wait for this to render, and we'll come back and then we'll render out the rest of our maps. Okay, so we've rendered that out at full resolution that we're looking for. Let's close this out, and I want to make sure that I have my skylight in there. It is in there. So let's go ahead and set up our render settings. So I'm going to go to render setup, and then I'm going to go to advanced lighting, and I'm going to use the light tracer plugin here. And we're going to go ahead and just leave everything default right now. Now, if you want to increase these, you can, but I really don't think that it's going to help too much. You will get a little bit more detail out of it, but I really don't think that it's necessary in this case. So let's go ahead and leave it just default, and let's come into our renderer, and I want to set up some anti-aliasing. I want to smooth these maps out as much as possible. So leaving all of these default is great, except I want to use a different filter here. We can come down through these and we could use different filters, and you can kind of look those up and get a good idea. But the Mitchell Netravelli is a great anti-aliasing filter to work with. Now we want to do some super sampling to really smooth this out and make it look really nice. Okay, so this is for our ambient occlusion. So I'm going to turn off disable all super samplers, and we're going to go down to let's go ahead and use Hammersley here, and then we're going to close this, and we're all set up there. Now with this diffuse map, I want to go ahead and change the name of this one. So I'm going to delete that one out. Let's add a new one, new diffuse map, and then we're going to bring in a lighting map, which is going to be our ambient occlusion. We want our normal map, and then we want a height map. So let's add those elements, and let's just leave these as plain 001 diffuse, lighting, normal, and height. You can change the name of those if you like, but we're just going to leave them the way they are right now. Let's select each one and set those to 1024 by 1024. Alright, so now that we have all of those, we should be ready to come in and just hit render. So I'm going to hit render on this, and we're going to get a little bit of a warning. Let's just not display that anymore and hit continue. We can overwrite the files here. It looks like we had some files previously in another folder there, but I'll put those in the right place, and we're just going to wait for this to render out. Now this is going to take just a little bit of time. We're going to get this same map, but we're going to have our shadows and things like that calculated into this diffuse map. So in our next lesson, we're going to take a look at those different maps and begin working on those and putting those into Photoshop. Alright, so I'll see you then.